Welcome back to another episode of Dark Things, a series that takes a deep dive into history's most disturbing events. Here's some not conspiracy theories, urban legends. Today we continue our coverage on Ted Bundy, the most notorious serial killer in the United States, and perhaps the world abroad. Well, as we delve deeper into Ted Bundy's dark and twisted world, it's important to understand the horrifying timeline of his crimes. Bundy's reign of terror spanned several states and left a trail of unspeakable horror in its wake. Bundy's killing spree began in the early 1970s and escalated quickly. In 1974, he embarked on a cross-country rampage, leaving a string of victims in his wake. His first known murders occurred in the Pacific Northwest, including Washington and Oregon, where he abducted, raped, and killed young women. One of his early victims was Lynda Ann Healy, a college student who disappeared from her home in Seattle in January of 1974. Her case would mark the beginning of Bundy's reign of terror. Bundy would often break into the homes of his victims, striking in the dead of night when they were least expecting it. And such was the case with Lynda Ann Healy. Lynda Ann Healy was only 21 years old when she fell victim to Ted Bundy. She disappeared on January 31st, 1974 in Seattle, Washington. Her remains were not found until March 3rd, 1975, in Taylor Mountain, Washington. Lynda Ann Healy was a tall, slender young woman with striking, long, dark hair and captivating blue eyes. She worked as a ski forecaster for Northwest Ski Reports while pursuing her senior year at Washington State University, majoring in psychology. Growing up in a sheltered middle-upper-class home near Seattle, she possessed a beautiful singing voice, but her true passion lay in working with mentally handicapped children. Now, at the time of her disappearance, she was living in this house that she shared with 4 other female college students. Lynda was known for her caution, especially in light of the recent attack on Joni Lentz. Now, despite this, on January 31st, her day began like any other. Rising at 5:30 a.m., she would hop on her bicycle, head to the reports office just a few blocks away. Throughout the day, Lynda participated in her usual classes and activities. At one point, she even wrote a cheerful letter to a close friend, mentioning the dinner she had planned for her parents the following evening. It was a letter filled with warmth and happiness. At night, well, there were some events that transpired that night that may have actually put her in harm's way. On the fateful night, Lynda Ann Healy vanished. She and her friends had gathered for drinks at a local bar known as Dante's Tavern. Despite sharing a couple of beers, they didn't stay out late. Lynda, being ever dependable, had an early work commitment the next morning, and one of their friends needed to catch a bus before 10 p.m. Consequently, they left Dante shortly after 9:30 p.m. Lynda's presence at Dante's on that fateful evening would prove significant in the ensuing investigation. Ted Bundy's long-term girlfriend, Liz Clover, had mentioned that he was a frequent patron of both Dante's Tavern and another nearby establishment called Operandi. Now, this raises the unsettling possibility that Bundy may have set his sights on the 20-year-old Lynda while she was socializing with her friends. Now, they all returned to the residence on 12th Avenue, a mere 0.2-mile walk from Dante's, taking roughly 5 minutes. After settling at home, Lynda spoke with her boyfriend on the phone for about an hour and engaged in conversation with one of her roommates. That evening, one of the women believed she saw a shadow lurking outside in the darkness. but she dismissed it as a product of her imagination. It's now conceivable that she might have caught a glimpse of Bundy prowling outside, circulating their activities, and assessing the situation, planning his actions for when darkness fell. Following her conversation with her roommate, Lynda Ann Healy headed downstairs toward her basement bedroom to prepare for sleep. Now, regrettably, this marked the last time anyone saw her alive. Lynda worked for a company that provided weather reports to the local ski resorts, and each morning her routine was to rise at 5:30 a.m. sharp and ride her bicycle to the college radio station where she'd deliver the snow condition updates for the resorts. On that ominous morning at 5:30 a.m., her alarm clock's radio began playing, as it usually did, but this time it never stopped. Lynda's roommate, upon realizing the radio had been playing continuously, initially assumed that Lynda didn't have to work that morning and was still in bed listening to the radio. However, a phone call from Lynda's workplace at 6:30 a.m. shattered that assumption. Concerned about her uncharacteristic absence, her boss contacted her roommates to inquire if her bicycle was still at home. And it was. Upon inspecting Lynda's bedroom, everything appeared deceptively normal. There were no overt signs that something sinister had occurred, but something peculiar caught their attention. On mornings where Lynda had early commitments, she never bothered to make her bed. However, this morning her bed was immaculately made, almost pristine. Now, a short while later, one of the roommates discovered that the side door leading to the basement was unlocked, which was unsettling since she distinctly remembered locking it before retiring for the night. Now, despite this strange turn of events, the roommates initially rationalized her unexplained absence by speculating that she might have gone to school or traveled to Olympia to visit her boyfriend. That immaculately dressed bedroom lay hidden. The picture that you see here that definitely showed his foul play. That was the day we're on. Their apprehension steadily grew after a series of phone calls revealed that no one had seen or heard from Lynda. They grew increasingly anxious. It wasn't until Lynda's father and brother arrived at their home for a planned dinner that the roommates finally decided to abandon their wishful thinking and take action. Now, upon learning the situation, Lynda's father, James, suggested waiting to see if she would turn up since it was only 6 p.m. However, call this mother's intuition. Lynda's mother, Joyce, was adamant. She immediately contacted the police, setting in motion the investigation into her daughter's disappearance. Now, at the outset, 2 patrolmen arrived at the residence and took statements, initially believing that it was just another case of a college student visiting a boyfriend or attending a party. However, later that night, a homicide detective arrived to investigate further. While inspecting Lynda's room, the detective pulled back the bed covers and noticed blood-stained sheets and the pillow. Moments later, he checked a closet and discovered her clothes that were bloody, that she had been worn to bed. And it also bore bloodstains around the collar area. Now, although aside from the bloodstains, there were no overt signs of a crime having occurred in it, it became increasingly evident that something deeply sinister transpired. Bundy, in the cover of a knife, had entered the house while the woman and viciously struck Lynda Ann Healy over the head, rendering her unconscious. The roommate in the adjoining basement room did not hear anything, suggesting that it was swift and brutal. Now, at the time of the abduction, Bundy was living at 4143 12th Avenue in the University District of Seattle. Bundy's rooming house was exactly zero point 0.8 miles away from the Healy residence. It would have taken him 10 to 15 minutes to walk the route by foot. By car, it was a 5-minute drive. Due to the short distance between the two houses, we can't discount the possibility that Bundy was stalking Healy in the days leading up to the attack. For example, he's been spotted co-ed while he was driving by her house. We would see her shopping at a local grocery store or cycling past his house. But subsequently, Bundy took time to meticulously clean the crime scene, continuing to prolong the time it took for authorities to realize they were dealing with a murder case. Linda's belongings, including her bag and clothes, were conspicuously missing from her room. Now, this deliberate act was an attempt to create the illusion that she had left the house on her own accord, something law enforcement describes as crime scene staging. After meticulously sanitizing the scene, Bundy transported his unconscious victim out through his side door of the house and placed her in his Volkswagen bug. He then drove to a secluded access road near Taylor Mountain. Now, the investigation into Lynda Ann Healy's disappearance and her subsequent murder led to the recovery of her lower jawbone and the unsettling fact that she had met a horrific end at the hands of Ted Bundy. Her tragic fate marked the beginning of Ted Bundy's sinister reign of terror. But Bundy's crimes weren't limited to a single modus operandi, and he would sometimes lure his victims into his car by pretending to be injured or in need of assistance. As we already previously mentioned, this happened to Carol DeRoche, a survivor, who gave her narrowing hearing escape story in the previous video from Utah. Perhaps one of the most infamous incidents in Bundy's timeline was the disappearance of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach in Florida. Her tragic fate marked the end of Bundy's murderous rampage. He was eventually captured by law enforcement while attempting to evade arrest. Speaking of law enforcement, there were numerous missed opportunities and close calls during Bundy's reign of terror. In some instances, he was pulled over by police, but his charm and seemingly innocuous demeanor allowed him to escape suspicion. Officers often described him as polite and well-spoken, a far cry from the terrifying monster he truly was. Additionally, Bundy was arrested multiple times for unrelated offenses such as theft, suspicious activity. However, his true nature as a serial killer remained hidden until later investigations connected the dots. Now, the chilling aspect of Bundy's timeline is not just the number of victims, but the audacity and the cunning in which he continued to elude law enforcement for years. Ted Bundy's timeline of crimes paints a harrowing picture of his ability to evade capture and continue his reign of terror. In our next segment, we'll explore Bundy's arrests, escapes from custody, and the sensational trials that followed. Stay with us as we continue to unravel the twisted mind of Ted Bundy on darker things. Until next time, I'm your host, Duncan, reminding you that once you enter the dark, you may never be the same.